Okay, welcome to another Parent University. Tonight, our session is focused on PBIS, which is our positive behavior interventions and supports. It's our overarching behavioral system that we use across all 20 schools in District 15. My name is Katie Dangler. I am an instructional coordinator in the Department of Teaching and Learning, and I am excited about our topic tonight because this is really a large function of my role, is helping support all of our schools, our staff, our students, our administrators with PBIS and all of its components, mostly at the Tier 1 level, which we'll talk a little bit about. That means for everybody universally across our district. I'm joined tonight by the fabulous director. Robin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Robin Cook. I work with Katie in the Office of Teaching and Learning. And similar to her, I'm excited to talk about this topic because this is something that is very pivotal to our work with our staff, with our students, and we're excited to engage parents and families and all the guardians that are a part of our district in this work that you can support this in your home as well. So it's exciting to talk about this evening. So a little bit about us in the Department of Teaching and Learning. We oversee the primary Tier 1, as Katie referred to it, as the core curricular components that your students interact with in their classroom. So things like their math materials, their science materials, their literacy materials, and all of the different areas that all of your students are having fun with all day with our staff. We also touch on a lot of their behavioral supports related to what all students get. So a lot of the PBIS efforts, those positive behavior interventions, are a big component of our work as well. You will find a link to some of these recordings as we go through our sessions. We've had a few previous sessions over the past few months related to our curriculum, to our report cards, since we have progress reports coming up in the next few weeks and parents and teacher conferences coming up. You can find a lot of links related to our work and how we can support you and your family and your students on the D15 website under Parent University. So feel free to tune in there and jump into a lot of those resources, especially as I said, we come up with conferences. We have some pointers that we had in some previous presentations around conferences and things you can do to engage your students in those conversations about conferences. And especially as you go to meet with those teachers around, what's going on with your student and getting some feedback. There's some great tips there on the website as well. So feel free to check those out. So tonight, we are going to talk a lot about what is PBIS and why is it important for D15. We have a lot of work around this with our staff and students, and so we want to make sure we're sharing this with you as well. We also are going to talk about what does it look like in school for your students and how they are engaging with it all day, every day in our schools, and then how we're going to end the evening with how you as a family can utilize these ideas at home to really cement what's going on in their classrooms, but also to help support you as a parent. I know as a parent myself that I love getting tips from my teachers that my kids are interacting with all day. And it's just a nice way to kind of make sure that we're using the same language, similar expectations, and it really helps to reinforce some of those things in our own home as well. So we're excited to talk about this. So let's talk a little bit about what is PBIS. So there's a lot of different misconceptions out there. So just to clear that up, PBIS is a proactive approach to setting positive expectations for student behavior so that all students can experience social, emotional, and academic success. I think a lot of times people see that word intervention and supports and they think like, oh, is this something bad? Or is this something like my kid needs extra help? It's really just about setting students up and teachers up for success with how do we operate at school? What does that look like? Some students, especially our younger students, this is the first time that they've been in a formalized education setting. And it's just a good way to set those expectations for this is what we do at school and this is how we act and this is how we help support you with those behaviors in our school. And then as we move through the ages of children, it's always important to keep those things in mind because we know that telling somebody something once is not always the final way for them to learn. We want to make sure that we always have those things going on all the way through our grade levels. So some of the reasons that we utilize PBIS at school is that it really helps us to have a positive and calm environment that is conducive for learning. We know that academic achievement and behavior and behavioral supports are not independent of each other and that they work together to really help students achieve in their learning environments and achieve highly in academics. It's something we talk a lot about with our staff, is that we don't just do behavior and then we teach content over here. They work together in harmony. How we teach helps influence students' behavior, and how we address student behavior influences how they learn. So it helps us to have fewer disruptions of behaviors. It allows us to have increased learning time when we have these expectations and positive behavior interventions in place. And it helps students feel that our schools are safe and caring and that they're valued. That's really a big part of why we focus on PBIS, because we want every student that comes into our doors in our schools to really feel like a valued community member and an important part of our learning environments.
So as we continue talking about PBIS, we want to make sure that you are aware of what this looks like and how it works in our District 15 schools. So just as the title of it, Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, the name of it in itself suggests, we focus on teaching and supporting positive behaviors for all of our students in our schools. And so what that means is when we are providing rules or expectations for students, we always state them in what we want to see, what we expect to see. So it's framing it in the positive rather than focusing on what we don't want or what we don't expect. Part of PBIS is setting universal structures for schools and for our classrooms. And we'll talk a little bit about what those structures look like in our schools. But this helps create that universal language that students, staff, families can know and expect what school will look like from day to day. And within our schools for PBIS, we also follow different processes or specific processes for acknowledging the positive behaviors that we have taught to our students that we expect to see. And we also have processes for responding to inappropriate behavior. Because I always say that, we're in the business of children. We have little humans in our care. Every human being makes mistakes. It's not if, it's when. And so we want to make sure that we are well equipped as the adults, as the educators, on how we can respond when our students are making mistakes, when they're making behavioral mistakes, and that we are able to help redirect and reinforce the positive expectation that we want to see from them. So one way that we structure our schools and our classrooms for success is by making sure that we have established clear behavior expectations for the different areas of our school. You might have heard your child talking about the expectations of the school as the 3 Bs, which are be respectful, be responsible, be safe. Sort of becomes a little bit of a mantra. Kids can quickly recite them. They know that those are the 3 Bs. And we intentionally, as educators, take time at the start of every school year to go over those 3 expectations and explicitly call out what those expectations mean for different areas of the school. So we take the time to bring students to the lunchroom and talk through, what does it mean to be respectful in a lunchroom? What does it mean to be safe in a lunchroom? We also take the time to teach those expectations through modeling. So we might do a time of the day where we rotate through these different areas so that we can teach, show, reinforce the positive expectations that we want to see with our students. Our goal is to create routines and procedures that are predictable for students, that they know what is expected of them, and they're not left wondering, is now an okay time to get up? What do I do if I can't find a fork? We've prepped them for that so that we can, just like in any core content academic subject, we have some problem solvers that we're creating here, that we're helping them navigate. How do they problem solve through behavior or through social situations? We also are very strategic about providing feedback to students. And we know that when we provide feedback about behavior, specifically about positive behaviors, it reinforces their motivation to continue to exhibit those behaviors. And so we provide them that feedback. It allows them to potentially change their behavior and allows our routines and our expectations to truly meet the needs of students. Ultimately, the structure is designed to positively influence their behavior because they'll be motivated to behave appropriately. They will have positive attitudes about school because they know what to expect. They can predict how to navigate throughout these different spaces in these environments throughout school, and ultimately it will lead to academic and social success within the classroom. We also have processes in District 15 for acknowledging positive behavior that we want to see in our students. And so our staff across our district look continually for opportunities to positively acknowledge and reinforce positive behavior and expectation. This is because it increases their motivation to continue doing that. When you get positive reinforcement or positive feedback for something that you're doing, it motivates you to want to continue to do that thing that got you that positive attention or positive result. And so across our district, we universally have this structure where we acknowledge positive behavior, but in our schools, that does have little nuances on what that could look like. So for example, at some schools, students might earn a paw or a star that indicates that they were respectful or responsible or safe. They might earn a certificate if they're the student of the trimester or the student of the month for the character trait. Some schools also have school stores that they tie these paws or these stars to, where students can then collect them and go and purchase prizes at the school store throughout the trimesters. They even plan these amazing celebrations where students come together to form this community across the school to celebrate the positive behaviors that they've exhibited throughout that time period and to reinforce that positive behavior that we continually are looking for and want to see. And then again, I already mentioned that, we are teaching little humans that are going to have mistakes and will likely, exhibit some inappropriate behaviors during their time in school. And so as District 15 staff, we have processes for responding to those inappropriate behaviors. We work within a continuum of responses, interventions, and supports so that we can redirect students and reduce the probability that those misbehaviors will recur. With PBIS, there are multiple tiers to that, which means there are multiple levels of responses. Just like behaviors exist across multiple levels, our responses and our reactions and our consequences are going to vary across those levels as well. And it's the same when we put interventions and supports in place. When we have students that maybe are not, they're not able to be as safe as they could be in the lunchroom, we have an intervention or a support we can put in place to help that student learn what the correct appropriate behavior is within that lunchroom, and then to help them monitor and track and grow from that. It's essentially like setting a behavior goal and monitoring it for some growth. So when we respond to inappropriate behavior in District 15, this can look a few different ways, but we are almost always reteaching the expectations to students, because if they are showing us something that would be inappropriate or some kind of misbehavior, we can't just assume that they know what the expected behavior is. We want to teach it or reteach it to them. We also do a lot of restoring of relationships, restoring of physical property if needed, so that we can help students understand that sometimes their behavior has negative impact on others. Maybe it negatively impacts their environment. And so what can they do to restore and amend that relationship that they might have broken a little bit during that inappropriate behavior? And we always provide very logical consequences. We're wanting to make sure that it's appropriate, that the level of misbehavior is attached to an appropriate level of a consequence. And we utilize a lot of data and tracking to make sure that we are truly looking for patterns with individual students and across our schools, so that we can really address areas of need as those come up.
All right, so let's talk about why we would connect PBIS to your home. I think one thing that I really appreciated about what Katie had mentioned before about the importance of why we even have PBIS and do some of these things in our schools is we want students to engage with what we're doing in our classrooms, right? We want them to be a part of our classrooms no matter their behavior, and we want to always maintain that relationship with them and restore those relationships, because we know that the majority of student behavior, good on the spectrum of good or bad, if you want to use those terms to define it, are a type of communication, right? Students are trying to tell you something with their behavior. And it's important to always keep that in mind. As a parent of very small children, I know that it's very hard sometimes to always keep in mind that a lot of times it is a bid for your attention, right? It's a bid for our connection with us. And so we want to always keep that at the forefront of our mind. And I think that that's something that is definitely very relatable to connecting some of these ideas into our homes, because I know as a parent, it can be sometimes easy to get overwhelmed with the behavior and you want to jump right into the punishment piece, but always trying to remember that there's a reason behind some of that behavior, and how PBIS can really help you in establishing some of those structures in your own home, because it allows your students to really, and your child, to help them feel a sense of control in their environment, right? It's hard to be a little person in a world made for adults, and it can help students and our children to really feel a sense of that control if we bring them in as a part of the process. That's a big component of PBIS, and this understanding of we're establishing expectations together, right? In the classroom here at our schools and at home, it's about how are we establishing those expectations together as a family. This is how we operate as a family, right? This is how we eat dinner. This is how we do these routines. It can help your child feel safe and secure and comfortable. Think about any time that you enter a new situation or a situation where you're feeling unsure, talking that through or even working through it with somebody who's been in that situation before can help you feel more comfortable in approaching that type of situation. You know what's going to happen now, you know what's going to happen next, and it makes you feel a little more at ease, and you're less likely to kind of like get nervous or even act out in some of those examples. It helps you to really know how to interact with certain family members, right? It helps you understand how to be independent in your own home as you're growing, right? And then also helps our children really just have positive interactions with each other, right? If they have siblings, or with you as a parent, if you're struggling with some behavior in your home. So we also have found that it's very helpful if parents are connecting some of that same language, right? At our schools, your students are hearing, be respectful, be responsible, be safe all the time. And so I know that this is something, even as a parent for myself, that it's always helpful, because they hear it so much at school, to really bring that up again. Like, is this something that's an example of being respectful? Or like, we want to make sure that we're being very responsible. And sometimes utilizing just that simple language shift can really help your student to connect. Oh, okay, I remember some of these examples at school, and I can apply that at home, or I can apply some of those similar principles at home. So that's important to remember. So similar to how a teacher would set up their normal expectations, like Katie shared, in a classroom, it can be helpful to do this with your child at home as well. We have some examples here on the screen that you can see that as you're establishing that morning routine, you can't just assume that your child is going to be conscientious of people who are sleeping. I'm going through this in my own house with my almost 4-year-old. You know, they wake up and they're ready for the day. And so really having those conversations and saying, you know, like, how should we talk? Should we have a really loud voice, or should we have a quiet voice if other people are sleeping? And they can engage in those conversations, and even just that little tweak, as opposed to don't yell, be quiet, have a quiet voice can really empower your child to take that on and really enact it appropriately in those times. And it's always a good reminder. I know I've heard myself say this as well. It's like, remember, we talked about this is how we're supposed to act at mealtime. It's how we're being responsible when we're eating together. Do you feel like you're being very responsible right now? And they say, oh, no, maybe not. Like, I probably should have washed my hands. Great, right? Because even as adults, it's important. Sometimes when it's our idea, we're much more readily ready to engage in some of those things as opposed to somebody saying, you did that wrong, now you should do this. So establishing those home behaviors and really setting those expectations with your children can go a long way.
Robin and I joked before we came on that we were learning so much about this, like, oh, I got to go home and do that. Because to your point, Robin, there are so many times when, as a mom, I will say, you know how I want you to clean your room. And then I have to stop and reflect and think, do they really know how I want them to clean their room? Have I ever actually gone through all of the steps? And so taking the time to do that is only going to help set them up for success. And it's also going to set us up for success and a little bit more sanity, which is really, a really great goal to have in general as parents. And so whenever you're establishing these routines or these structures at home, just like in school, we explicitly teach these to students because we don't want to just assume that they know how to enter a classroom or how to hang their backpack up on the hook or where to put their homework. We explicitly go through those steps, and sometimes it's painful because we go through it many, 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 many times. But the idea that you are modeling and practicing what expectations and routines look like, really that time you put in will pay off. So with your child, taking the time to show them what the routine or the expectation or the task looks like. Sometimes it involves actually teaching them how to do something and then giving them time to practice it. Just like with learning to tie your shoes, you might show them and teach them, and then you're going to let them start to learn how to tie their shoes, right? Because the goal is for them to be able to do it on their own. And so you'll provide some praise, some feedback. Maybe you'll, give a little bit of redirection or recorrection as they're going through and give them some tips on how to do something. And all of that is helping reinforce the expectations that you're wanting to set at home. And ultimately, we're trying to help empower our children to be able to do these tasks independently. And, that's really the goal, that we're not needing to constantly be there to watch over them and make sure that they're doing all of these steps, but rather that they're able to move through the home and move through our schools on their own because they know what to do and what's expected. So even some of these visuals that are on the screen here, posting, coming up with a routine and posting that. And that way, then, you can start to just point to the routine and did you do all the steps or did you go through your routine? Okay, great. Come on and have your breakfast now. It sounds like you're ready. It's just another visual reminder for our children. And it's always important to remember that as you are teaching, sometimes it's monotonous because, like I said, you're doing this over and over, you're repeating the same thing. That consistency is really important. So making sure that you're establishing routines that are simple enough to execute for both yourself and for your child, that you focus on the positives and that you try to keep it fun, make it fun, keep it fun. Because, cleaning rooms, for some it's fun, but for others it's not. So how can you find the little moments of fun within that task that will allow your child to feel empowered and motivated to do it? So whenever after you've taught that routine or that procedure, just like in school, after we've done that, we're looking for ways to acknowledge and reinforce the expectations and the behaviors that we want to see. And I came across this visual on a website from an educator, Angela Watson, who has a really great post about going beyond the words of like, good job, right? These uh, sort of empty praises where you just say, oh, that's nice, good job, good work. But being really descriptive when you're providing that reinforcement or that acknowledgement, letting your child know what they did that was good. You know, good job making your bed. I love that you put your pillows all in that order that you did. Great job picking up all your stuffed animals. I love that your floor looks so clean and I can walk through your room now. The more descriptive you are, it points the child to the exact specific reason why they're getting that praise. And that's going to be the thing that they're going to want to repeat. It's also important to emphasize the different traits or character building that they did when they were going through that task or through that activity or through that routine. Because even when they're not successful at something, even when they're not successful at that routine, there's likely something, some kind of task or trait or some kind of accomplishment that you can pinpoint and elevate so that they know that you have seen some type of growth or some type of effort, right? On this list is also the idea that we encourage kids when they are trying something that maybe is out of their comfort zone. It's kind of easy as adults to fall into doing the things that we feel comfortable or good at. And kids tend to get to that place as well. And it's hard to get them to sort of break out of that shell and experiment and try new things. And so we want to encourage children whenever they are trying something that maybe isn't easy for them, it doesn't come naturally to them. So for example, I have one child who she's not great at organizing and keeping things orderly in her folder for school. And so she's come up with her own little system, and I don't necessarily get it. It's not necessarily the system I would have chosen for her. But I still want to encourage her because she's trying to figure out what's working for her. And so it's not me trying to impose my way on her, but rather letting her kind of figure out, does this work? And then when she doesn't have her homework the next day, then we have to have a conversation about the system that she put in place and why it's working or not working. We also want to focus on complimenting kids on things that they have control over, that they have the power to change. So it isn't, we don't want to focus on things that they're just out of their control, like their height or how quickly they're grasping something, but rather focus on things like their effort or their attitude towards something. And whenever we provide praise and compliments, we want it to be authentic. So it's not necessarily asking you to inauthentically look for positive things to point out, but rather to use phrases and compliments that feel more natural to you and your family, and truly look for opportunities to be authentic and sincere.
While you're working through that journey, I think it's also important you can utilize some of the components within that we do within our school systems, which is that reinforcement piece that Katie talked so well about earlier on. Is this idea of like the acknowledgments don't always have to be just verbal. You can make it fun for your family, just like they get to visit the school store with their, with all the paws that they've received. Maybe you have worked on with your child that these are the expectations that we're going to follow. And what are we going to do to really celebrate and acknowledge that we did a good job as a family, right? And also as if in some of those areas that maybe you've identified you want to work on, right? So some ideas of just making it fun for yourself and for your child. Some people will make like coupons at home, or they get to pick their own dinner, or they get to have some extra video game time. They get to get out of chores maybe someday, or I know one of my kids' favorite eats dessert before dinner. That's very exciting at our house. But making it fun, finding what really helps your child engage in this with you, and really zoning in on that is important. I think another important piece to always remember is that it's important to revise and remind your child. Just like adults, sometimes we forget, we fall out of habits, and it can just be hard to kind of keep up expectations. And so just being able to be flexible as a parent and continually being a partner in this journey with your child is really important. And then as they grow, revising those expectations. I know that as a former even high school teacher, this kind of establishing expectations, working towards a goal, having positive reinforcement works for children of all ages. It works for adults as well. And so making sure that you're revising your expectations at your home, you're revising what that looks like and what success looks like as a family together as they grow. And you'd be surprised how much students, even at an older age, will engage in some of this. I can attest from my own classroom where, high school students will do a lot for a pizza party. So.
I also think a little bit about as children are growing up, they're being exposed to new and more things. So I think about, as they start to get to the age where they're getting their own devices or they're getting their own cell phone, setting up those expectations of what does that look like to be respectful, responsible, and safe with those in the home and outside of the home. And those things will continually change and grow and evolve as our children, grow and experience new different things. So I love the idea of just continuing to refine and make sure that the pieces that you've established for your family are still true. We have put together a few external resources that we found that just provide some good tips and tricks for building structures in your home or for different discipline or consequences in the home. So if you go to cdc.gov, that's our Center for Disease Control there. And if you even just type into Google quick tips for building structures at home, this link will pop up. And these tips are available in English and in Spanish. So that's great to know. And then on PBIS.org, if you go to that site and you go under publications, there are all sorts of articles and resources mainly focused for educators for utilizing at school, but you can find some really fantastic resources for families. And this one in particular, Supporting Families with PBIS at Home, outlines a lot of the steps that we talked through today and might give you a few other additional ideas. I also wanted to point out that when we are doing our parent universities, especially in our format of the virtual space, it's really difficult for us to navigate and manage like a live Q&A session, but we do value your feedback and we want to make sure we're addressing any questions that you might have. So please know that we have on our District 15 website under Parent University, there is a link to submit questions or topic ideas. And whenever you submit those, I'm actually the one who goes in, I read them, and then I will respond and or point you to the person that, maybe would be more equipped to respond. But we want to make sure that the sessions that we're providing are timely, are helpful, and answer the true questions that you have. So please don't hesitate to submit any questions through that link. And the last piece of information I want to leave you with are just a few important upcoming dates that we would like you to just take note of. So this Friday, November 18th, will be the day that the elementary school report cards come home. So that's grades 1 through 6. We have parent-teacher conferences next week. So you should have received some type of communication from your child's teacher so that you can set up a prearranged time to go into the school and meet with your child's teacher. And know that for students next week, the whole entire week, November 21st through the 25th, there is no school. It's no attendance for students during that period of time. So it might be a great time to utilize some of these routines and procedures to save some sanity in the home. And then, as we come back, and I can't believe it'll already be December, we have some really great parent university sessions coming up. On December 7th, we have a really fantastic hour of code session that will be occurring. And this one's actually going to be a concurrent offering. So you can go in person to the Winston campus elementary/junior high school library, and you and your family will be able to participate in the hour of code, where you together are learning computer science, how to code, and it's all done through creating these really neat games and learning how to navigate that. So that will take place between 6 and 7 o'clock at Winston campus, starting at 6 o'clock. So make sure that you try to arrive at that time. And they are going to simultaneously post that virtually. So if your family is unable to come in person, hopefully you can at least join virtually and or maybe engage in the recorded session. And then the following week on December 14th, we are very excited to bring in Dr. Doug Bolton. He will be coming to offer a virtual session on supporting children's mental health, especially in this post-COVID world. And it's very timely because as we, start to get into these cold winter months, and it's right before even our winter break where we have a longer period of time with, some routine disruption. This will be a session that really offers a lot of support for your family and for your children, and just how to support them, as all these changes are occurring throughout the world and throughout the year. So we, as always, want to thank you for attending, whether you are watching this live or you are joining and listening to the recording. We appreciate your time and your engagement and your involvement in District 15, and we look forward to seeing you in the coming weeks at our next sessions and at parent-teacher conferences. So thank you so much.